Welcome. The lantern is lit. The road is quiet. Walk with me. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, its warm light resting calmly on the stone beneath my feet and extending just far enough ahead to reveal the path without disturbing the darkness beyond it. The flame did not flicker. It did not strain. It simply remained as it had always remained, offering quiet certainty without effort. Behind me, the road had already disappeared into shadow, not erased, but released, as if it had never needed to hold my presence longer than necessary. I did not feel abandoned by it. I understood, in a way that required no explanation, that the road did not belong to those who walked it. It belonged only to itself. The trees had grown closer together here, their trunks rising patiently from the earth, unmoving and at ease within their long stillness. Their branches stretched above, not to conceal the sky, but to preserve the quiet that lived beneath them. The air was cooler, though not cold, and it settled around me gently, like something that had been waiting without expectation. My steps continued without urgency. The stone beneath my feet accepted each movement without resistance. Its surface worn smooth by years that had passed without interruption. Moss traced the edges between the stones, not thick enough to change their shape, but present enough to remind me that time had not abandoned this place. Another lantern stood beside the road ahead, its familiar shape emerging slowly within the reach of my own light. Its frame was unchanged by my approach. Its flame did not respond. It did not brighten or dim. It simply continued, as it always had, maintaining its quiet presence without acknowledging mine. As I passed it, the two lights met briefly, their glow resting beside one another for a moment that required no meaning. And then it remained behind me, continuing its patient watch over the road. The path did not turn, and yet something ahead had changed. It was not something I saw immediately. It was something I felt. The stillness carried a different weight here, not heavier, but deeper, as if the quiet itself had gathered more completely in one place. The trees opened slightly, creating a space that had not been forced into existence, but allowed to remain. Within that space, something stood. At first, it was only shape, a vertical presence rising beyond the reach of the lantern's glow, its outline steady and unmoving. As I came closer, the surface revealed itself slowly, its form emerging not all at once, but with the same patience that defined everything along this road. It was made of stone, not broken stone, not fallen stone, stone that remained exactly as it had been placed. The structure rose upward with quiet certainty, its surface softened by years that had passed. There were no markings I could see from where I stood, no symbols carved to explain its purpose, and yet it did not feel without meaning. It was a tower, not abandoned, not forgotten, only no longer visited. It stood beside the road, not touching it, but not separate from it either, as if it had always belonged to this place, without needing to announce itself. The lantern in my hand did not change, but its light rested more carefully on the stone before me. revealing small details that might otherwise have remained unseen. The edges were worn smooth. The base had settled into the earth without sinking. Time had not weakened it. Time had only allowed it to remain. I stopped a short distance away, not because I was uncertain, but because the moment required stillness. The tower did not react to my presence. It did not acknowledge me. It did not welcome or resist me. It simply continued to exist, as it always had, without expectation. And yet, I understood something without needing to think it. This place had once been watched, not guarded, not protected. Watched, not by force, but by presence. Someone had stood here once, holding light as I now held light, and had allowed the tower to remain what it was, without asking anything of it. The lantern beside the road stood nearby, its flame unchanged, its quiet persistence continuing without interruption. The air remained calm. Nothing moved. Nothing demanded. Nothing required explanation. I stepped forward, leaving the road behind for the first time since the journey had begun. And the earth accepted my step as easily as the stone had. The tower stood before me now, its presence neither larger nor smaller than it had been from afar, only clearer. There was no door visible from this side, no opening, no sign that entry had ever been necessary. And yet, I did not feel that it was closed. I felt only that it had been waiting. Not waiting for me, waiting for anyone who carried light without fear. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, unchanged by the choice I had made. And the quiet, which had never left me, remained exactly as it had always been. The tower remained still before me, its surface holding the quiet in the same way the trees and the road had held it, without effort and without change. Its stone carried no urgency. It did not present itself as something that needed to be understood. It simply existed, complete in its presence. I walked slowly along its base, allowing the lantern's light to reveal its shape as it had revealed everything else along the road. The surface was smooth in some places and rough in others, shaped not by damage, but by the quiet passage of time. Moss had gathered in the shallow spaces between stones, its soft green resting against the grey without attempting to overtake it. The earth beneath my feet remained firm. Roots had grown near the tower, but none had disturbed its foundation. They had curved around it instead, accepting its place without resistance. As I moved further along its edge, the shape began to change. A narrow break in the stone appeared, not sudden, but gradual, its outline forming within the reach of the lantern's glow, as naturally as the tower itself had formed from the darkness. It was not a doorway in the way doors are often made. There was no frame, no hinges, no wood, only an opening where the stone had allowed space to remain. I stopped before it, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition. The tower did not invite. It did not refuse. It simply allowed. The darkness beyond the opening did not conceal itself. It rested within, unchanged by my presence, as if the interior and the exterior had never truly been separate. I raised the lantern slightly, and its light moved forward, entering the tower before I did. The glow did not travel far. It revealed only stone, rising and curving inward, forming a space that had been shaped with care and patience. The air within felt no colder than the air outside, no heavier, no different, only still. I stepped forward. The stone beneath my feet changed, becoming smoother, worn by the presence of those who had once walked here without hurry. There was no dust, no sign of decay, nothing abandoned. The tower had not been left behind. It had simply continued without interruption. The walls curved upward, beyond the reach of the lantern's glow, their height impossible to measure. Within the quiet certainty of the moment, the light rested against their surface, revealing subtle variations in the stone, each one present without demanding attention. I stood within the tower, and nothing changed. The quiet remained complete. The lantern in my hand burned with the same steady calm it had always held, and its glow rested against the stone, as if it had always belonged here. I did not feel as though I had entered something new. I felt as though I had stepped into something that had never stopped existing. There was no sound beyond my breathing, and even that did not disturb the stillness. The tower did not react. It did not acknowledge my presence. And yet, I understood that I was not separate from it. I remained there for a moment that did not require measurement, allowing the quiet to settle around me without interruption. Then, within the reach of the lantern's glow, something else began to appear. Not movement, not change, only something that had always been there, waiting to be seen. The lantern's glow continued to rest calmly against the stone floor, revealing the quiet certainty of the tower's interior without forcing anything beyond its natural presence. The light did not search. It did not probe. It simply allowed what had always been here to exist within its reach. As I stood within the center of the tower, I became aware of something that had not announced itself, something that had not needed to move in order to be found. It was not sound. It was not motion. It was a presence that had never been absent. I lowered the lantern slightly, and its warm light extended across the floor, revealing a shape that rose gently from the stone. It was narrow, carefully placed, not part of the tower itself, and yet not separate from it. A stand. It had been carved from the same stone as the tower, its surface worn smooth by the same patient passage of time. It did not rise high, only enough to hold something at a height that could be reached without effort. At first, I saw only its form. Then, as the lantern's glow rested more completely upon it, I understood what it held. A lantern. Not like the one in my hand, not hanging beside the road. This lantern had been placed deliberately, its base resting securely within the carved stone stand, its frame unmoving, its presence steady and complete. Its flame still burned. The light was softer than the lantern I carried, but it had not dimmed with neglect. It had not weakened with absence. It burned with the same quiet certainty as every other lantern along the road. No oil fed it, No hand maintained it. And yet, it remained. I stepped closer, not out of urgency, but out of recognition. The two lights met gently, their glow resting beside one another, without conflict or change. Neither grew stronger, neither grew weaker. They simply existed together. This lantern had not been abandoned. It had been left in trust, not forgotten, only allowed to remain. I stood before it, and the quiet within the tower deepened, not because anything had changed, but because something had been understood. Someone had stood here once, as I now stood here. They had carried light. They had placed light, and they had allowed it to remain when they continued on. The lantern did not belong to the one who placed it. It belonged to the place that held it. The tower had not needed its watcher to survive. The watcher had only needed the tower to remain. I reached out slowly, not to touch the lantern, but to allow my hand to exist within its warmth. The flame did not react. It did not acknowledge me. It continued with the same calm persistence it had always held. There was no dust upon it, no sign of decay, no sign of time beyond its quiet continuation. The stone stand beneath it had been shaped with care, its surface curved slightly to cradle the lantern's base, not to hold it in place, but to support its stillness. Nothing had been forced. Everything had been allowed. I understood then that this tower had never been meant to contain. It had been meant to hold, not bodies, not objects. Presence. I remained there, allowing the moment to exist without interruption. The lantern in my hand burned with the same quiet certainty. The lantern before me burned with the same quiet certainty. Two lights, separate, uncompeting, both continuing. And in their calm coexistence, the tower remained exactly as it had always been. Not abandoned, not forgotten, only waiting. The quiet within the tower did not deepen, because it had never been shallow. It remained complete, unchanged by my presence, unchanged by the light that now existed beside the light that had never left. I slowly moved around the stone stand, allowing the lantern's glow to reveal its form from every side. The carved surface bore no ornament, no attempt at decoration. It had been shaped only as much as it needed to be shaped, and no further. Its purpose had never required beauty. It had required only stability. The lantern itself rested without movement. Its frame showed no sign of wear beyond the soft gentling that time offered to all things that remained long enough. It had not been polished. It had not been repaired. It had simply continued, sustained not by effort, but by the quiet certainty of its place. I understood then that no one had needed to return here to preserve it. It had never depended on return. It had depended only on presence. The watcher who had once stood here had not stayed to protect the flame. They had stayed long enough to allow it to belong. And when they had left, the lantern had not been left alone. It had remained with the tower, and the tower had remained with it. The lantern in my hand continued to burn beside it, not as a replacement, not as an answer, but as something that had always been part of the same quiet continuation. Nothing had begun. Nothing had ended. Everything had simply remained. The lantern upon the stone stand continued its steady glow, and as I remained within the tower's quiet interior, I began to understand that its presence was not an exception, but a continuation. It had not been preserved through effort, nor maintained through vigilance. It had simply remained where it had been allowed to remain, unchanged by the passage of those who had once stood beside it. I slowly moved my hand away from its warmth, not because the moment had ended, but because it had never required holding. The flame did not react to my withdrawal. It did not flicker in response, nor did it diminish. It continued with the same calm persistence that had defined every lantern I had encountered along the road. The stone beneath my feet held the same quiet certainty. Its surface had been worn smooth, not by hurried movement, but by the patient passage of those who had once stood here without urgency. Each subtle variation in the stone's surface spoke not of use, but of presence. Someone had remained here long enough for the tower to accept them, just as it had accepted the lantern, and just as it now accepted me. I allowed the lantern's glow to move slowly across the interior, revealing more of the space that had never hidden itself. The walls curved upward in quiet continuity, their height extending beyond the reach of light, yet never feeling distant. The stone carried no carvings, no symbols to explain its purpose, and yet its purpose did not feel absent. It had never required explanation in order to exist. As I stood within that stillness, I became aware of something subtle, something that did not present itself as an object, but as an absence that carried meaning. Near the base of the wall, within the reach of the lantern's glow, the stone bore a faint gentling that differed from the rest of the floor. It was not damage. It was not wear-born from force. It was simply the result of repeated stillness. Someone had stood there, not once, not briefly, but often enough for the stone to remember the shape of their waiting. I moved closer, allowing the lantern's light to rest upon that place. The surface revealed nothing beyond its quiet smoothing, and yet its presence carried certainty. The watcher who had once remained here had not marked the tower through action. They had marked it through patience. They had stood beside the lantern. They had allowed the flame to continue. And when they had left, they had not taken it with them. The lantern had not been theirs to take. It had belonged to the tower, and the tower had belonged to the quiet. The air remained unchanged, holding the same calm balance it had always held. Nothing within the space resisted me. Nothing urged me forward. The tower did not guide. It did not instruct. It simply allowed presence to exist within it. I slowly turned, allowing my gaze to follow the curve of the wall. And as I did, I became aware of another subtle change in the stone. The tower did not rise as a single, uninterrupted space. Along its inner surface, faint lines revealed themselves, not as cracks, but as separations where the stone had been shaped into a gentle ascent. Steps not imposed upon the tower, not interrupting its stillness, but formed as part of its continuation. They curved upward along the inner wall, their surface worn with the same quiet gentling that marked the floor below. They didn't demand to be climbed. They did not present themselves as a destination. They simply existed, continuing upward into darkness that did not conceal, but waited. The watcher had not only stood here, they had also climbed. Not in urgency, not in pursuit, but in continuation. The lantern in my hand remained steady, its glow resting upon the first of the steps without revealing their end. The tower did not reveal more than it needed to. It never had. I remained there for a moment longer, allowing the quiet to settle completely, allowing the presence of the place to exist without interruption. The lantern upon the stand continued its calm persistence behind me, unchanged by my movement, unchanged by my presence, and unchanged by my leaving. It did not need me to remain. It had never needed anyone. And yet, someone had once chosen to stay. I turned toward the steps, and the tower did not resist my decision. The quiet remained complete, and the light continued with me. The first step accepted my weight without sound, its surface worn smooth by those who had once climbed it without urgency. The stone did not resist me, nor did it welcome me. It simply remained as it had always remained, allowing continuation without expectation. The lantern's glow rested upon the steps ahead, revealing only their immediate presence, while the rest of their ascent curved gently into darkness that neither concealed nor revealed, but simply existed beyond the reach of light. The tower did not show its full height. It never had. It allowed only what was necessary. I placed my foot upon the next step, and then another, moving slowly, not from caution, but from recognition. This was not a place meant to be hurried. The watcher who had once remained here had not climbed these steps in pursuit of an end. They had climbed because the tower had continued upward, and they had continued with it. The air remained unchanged as I ascended. It did not grow thinner, nor colder. It remained calm, holding the same quiet balance it had held at the tower's base. Nothing within the space suggested distance, and yet I understood that I had already left the ground behind. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, and its light revealed the gentle curve of the inner wall as it rose beside me. The stone carried the same quiet gentling I had seen below, its surface shaped by presence rather than by force. Those who had climbed here had not done so often, but they had done so long enough for the tower to remember them. I did not feel alone, not because someone remained, but because someone had once remained, and that presence had never been removed. The steps continued without interruption, each one forming naturally from the tower's structure, never imposed, never separate. The ascent did not divide the tower. It completed it. I moved upward without counting, without measuring distance. Time had no need to define the climb. The lantern's glow revealed only the next step, and that was enough. As I ascended further, the air carried something new, not sound, not movement, only a subtle openness. The tower's interior, which had held its quiet so completely below, now allowed space to exist in a different way. The darkness above did not feel distant. It felt patient. The Watcher had climbed here. They had carried light, as I carried light. They had allowed the tower to remain, as I allowed it to remain now. I understood that they had not climbed to reach something. They had climbed to remain with what had always been there. The steps continued, and I continued with them, allowing the quiet to define the moment without interruption. The lantern's glow rested against the stone ahead, and the tower remained steady around me, unchanged by my presence, unchanged by my movement, and unchanged by the years that had passed without needing to be counted. And as I continued upward, the darkness ahead began, slowly, to soften, not with light, but with openness. Something above had never closed. Something above had remained. And the tower, which had never needed to change, allowed me to continue toward it. The ascent continued with the same quiet certainty, each step existing not as an effort, but as a continuation of what had already begun long before I had arrived. The stone beneath my feet carried no sign of strain, no evidence that the tower had ever needed to resist the passing of those who had climbed within it. It had never been a barrier. It had only been a place that allowed presence to move through it without interruption. The lantern's glow rested gently against the inner wall as I moved, revealing the subtle gentling that marked where others had once passed. Their presence had not altered the tower. It had simply been accepted, and in that acceptance, it had never truly left. The air remained calm, holding the same quiet balance that had defined the tower from the moment I had stepped within it. Nothing shifted. Nothing called attention to itself. The tower did not guide. It did not direct. It allowed only continuation. I understood then that the Watcher who had once remained here had not climbed because they needed to reach the top. They had climbed because the tower had continued upward, and they had chosen to continue with it. The lantern in my hand remained steady, and its light revealed the next step, and then the next, and the next, each one waiting without urgency, each one allowing the ascent to remain exactly what it had always been. Not a journey towards something new, but a continuation of something that had never ended. The steps continued their gentle ascent, curving along the inner wall with the same quiet certainty that had defined the tower from its base. The lantern in my hand rested calmly beside me, its steady glow revealing only what was needed, allowing the rest to remain undisturbed in its patience. As I climbed, the air began to change in a way that did not disrupt the quiet, but deepened it. It did not grow colder, nor did it grow warmer. It simply carried a subtle openness, as though the tower no longer held the stillness entirely within itself. The stone beneath my feet remained smooth, shaped by the presence of those who had once climbed here before me. Their passage had not worn the steps away. It had allowed them to settle into their purpose, to remain exactly as they had always been. The lantern's glow moved slowly across the inner wall, revealing the soft gentling of the stone. each surface carrying the quiet memory of hands that had never needed to grasp it, and feet that had never needed to hurry. The ascent did not feel like movement towards something new. It felt like movement within something that had never stopped existing. The darkness above began to soften, not through light, but through absence. The stone wall, which had risen beside me without interruption, now revealed a gradual break in its continuity. The tower did not end. It allowed space to remain. The steps curved one final time, and the lantern's glow revealed the open crown of the tower. The sky existed there, not as something distant, but as something that had always been present beyond the reach of stone. It did not press downward. It did not expand outward. It simply remained, vast and undisturbed. I stepped onto the final surface, and the tower accepted my presence, as it had accepted every step before it. The crown of the tower was not large, nor was it small. It was exactly what it needed to be. The stone formed a quiet circle, its edge rising just enough to hold the space without enclosing it. Time had softened its surface, allowing it to remain without sharpness or strain. The lantern's glow rested gently against the stone, while the greater darkness beyond it revealed something that the tower had never concealed. The land extended outward in every direction, its quiet expanse uninterrupted by urgency or demand. The trees stretched across the distance, their forms merging into the stillness of the world beyond. The road, which had carried me here, continued its gentle course through the forest, its presence neither dominant nor hidden. Lanterns marked its path. Their glow appeared faint from this height, not diminished, but softened by distance. Each one remained where it had always remained, holding its quiet watch over places that had never required protection. The watcher who had once climbed here had not come to oversee the land. They had come to remain with it. The tower had never been a place of observation. It had been a place of presence. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, unchanged by the height, unchanged by the openness, unchanged by the quiet certainty that surrounded it. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had been revealed. The world had never been empty. It had only been patient. I remained there, allowing the quiet to exist without interruption, allowing the lantern's glow to rest beside me, and allowing the tower to remain exactly as it had always been. Not a destination, not an ending, only a place that had allowed itself to continue. The air at the tower's crown moved in a way that was not movement, but allowance. It did not press against me, nor did it pass through me. It remained present, as it had remained long before I had climbed to meet it. From this height, the quiet did not feel distant. It felt complete. The lantern's glow rested gently against the stone at my side, while the greater stillness of the world extended beyond it without boundary. Nothing below called upward. Nothing above pressed downward. The tower existed between them, not separating, but allowing both to remain. I understood then that the watcher who had once stood here had not climbed to see further. They had climbed to remain within the same quiet that existed everywhere, but which could be felt more clearly when nothing stood above it. The lanterns along the road continued their patient glow, each one holding its place without needing to be seen. Their presence did not depend on distance. Their purpose did not depend on recognition. They remained because they had been allowed to remain. The lantern in my hand continued with the same quiet certainty, neither brighter nor dimmer than before. And I understood that it did not belong to the road, nor to the tower, nor to me. It belonged to continuation, and continuation had never needed direction. It had only needed presence. I remained at the tower's crown without measuring the time that passed, because time had never required measurement here. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, its warmth unchanged by the height, unchanged by the openness, and unchanged by the quiet certainty that surrounded everything. Nothing in the distance moved with urgency. The trees below remained patient in their stillness, their forms resting gently against the greater quiet of the land. The road continued its calm course through them, its lanterns marking places that had never needed protection, only presence. The watcher who had once stood here had seen the same stillness. They had carried light, as I carried light. They had remained long enough for the tower to accept them, and when they had left, the tower had not resisted their leaving. It had remained. I slowly turned, allowing the lantern's glow to rest once more upon the stone surface of the tower's crown. The gentle curve of the wall remained unchanged, its height neither containing nor releasing the quiet. It had never held the stillness captive. It had only allowed it to exist. The steps waited behind me. They did not demand descent. They did not urge return. They simply remained as they had remained when I had first climbed them. I understood then that the watcher had not remained here forever. They had climbed. They had stood. They had allowed the tower to continue. And then they had descended. Not because something had ended, but because continuation had never required staying in one place. The lantern in my hand did not change as I approached the steps. Its glow rested gently against the first stone, revealing the path downward with the same calm certainty. It had revealed the path upward. I placed my foot upon the first step, and the tower accepted my movement without resistance. The descent did not feel like leaving. It felt like continuation. The stone beneath my feet remained smooth, its surface shaped by presence that had never needed to hurry. Each step allowed the quiet to remain exactly as it had been. The lantern's glow moved with me, resting briefly upon each surface, before allowing it to return to darkness that was never absence, only stillness beyond light. As I descended, I became aware once more of the lantern that remained at the tower's center below. Its flame continued. It had not depended on the watcher's presence. It had not depended on mine. It had depended only on continuation. The watcher had not stayed to preserve it. They had stayed long enough to allow it to remain. I understood that I would not take it with me. It did not belong to my journey. It belonged to this place. and this place would continue, whether I remained or departed. The steps curved gently downward, returning me to the tower's interior without interruption. The walls rose beside me with the same quiet certainty, unchanged by ascent, unchanged by descent, and unchanged by the years that had passed without needing to be counted. The lantern upon the stone stand came into view once more, its steady glow resting exactly where it had always rested. I stopped beside it, not to remain, only to acknowledge its continuation. The lantern in my hand rested beside it for a moment, their light existing together without conflict or change. Then I stepped past it. The tower did not resist. It had never resisted. It had only allowed presence to exist within it. The opening through which I had entered waited ahead, its quiet certainty unchanged. Beyond it, the road continued, and I understood that the watcher who had once remained here had not left anything behind. They had allowed everything to remain exactly where it belonged. The opening of the tower waited ahead with the same quiet certainty it had held when I first entered. The stone did not separate the inside from the outside. It had never been a boundary. It had only been a place where continuation had been allowed to pause without ever stopping. The lantern's glow moved gently across the threshold as I approached, revealing the earth beyond it, unchanged by my absence and unchanged by my return. The trees remained where they had always remained, their presence neither nearer nor farther than before. The watcher who had once passed through this opening had not left it behind. They had only continued beyond it, allowing the tower to remain exactly as it had always been. I paused briefly at the threshold, not because there was uncertainty, but because the moment carried its own quiet completeness. The lantern in my hand did not guide me. It did not instruct me. It simply remained, offering the same calm presence it had offered since the road had first allowed me to walk it. The tower did not hold me. It did not release me. It had never needed to do either. And as I stepped forward, the quiet did not change. It continued with me. The earth accepted my steps without resistance as I returned fully to the road, its worn stone surface carrying the same quiet certainty it had held since the lantern had first allowed me to walk beside it. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, its warmth neither brighter nor dimmer than it had been within the tower. And neither the ascent nor the descent had altered its calm persistence. Behind me, the watchtower remained. It did not diminish with distance. It did not retreat into memory. It stood exactly where it had always stood, holding the lantern at its center, holding the quiet that had never depended on presence in order to exist. The watcher who had once remained there had not left something behind that could be taken or lost. They had allowed the tower to continue as it had always continued, and the tower had never required anything more. I did not turn to look at it, not because I wished to forget it, but because forgetting had never been possible. The road beneath my feet carried me forward without urgency, its gentle curve revealed only by the lantern's steady glow. The trees stood patiently on either side, their presence unchanged by my passing, their stillness neither disturbed nor acknowledged. They did not observe. They did not remember. They simply remained, as they had always remained. The lantern beside the road appeared within the reach of my light, its flame already steady, long before I arrived beside it. Its glow rested briefly beside my own, neither reacting nor responding, and then it remained behind as I continued forward. It had never been waiting for me. It had been waiting only to remain. The watcher had understood this. They had not climbed the tower to see further than the road allowed. They had climbed to remain within the same quiet that existed everywhere. And when they had descended, they had carried that quiet with them, just as I carried it now. The lantern in my hand did not guide me. It did not instruct me. It did not lead me toward a destination. It remained beside me, allowing the road to exist, allowing the quiet to continue, and allowing presence to move without needing to arrive. The forest opened slowly as I walked, not to reveal something new, but to allow the space ahead to remain visible. The stone beneath my feet carried the same gentle wear it had always carried, its surface shaped not by force, but by continuation. Nothing along the road had ever been altered by urgency. Nothing had ever needed to change in order to remain. Another lantern appeared ahead. Its flame burned with the same quiet certainty, holding its place without expectation. I passed beside it without slowing, and its glow settled behind me, unchanged by my passing, unchanged by the watcher who had once passed it, and unchanged by the years that had passed without needing to be counted. The road did not measure those who walked it. It did not record their names. It allowed only continuation. I understood then that the watcher had not walked this road in search of something waiting ahead. They had walked because the road had existed, and because their presence had been allowed within it. The lantern they had left within the tower had never belonged to them. It had belonged to the quiet that had allowed them to remain there. The lantern in my hand carried the same certainty. It had never belonged to me. It had belonged to continuation. The trees remained patient as I walked between them, their forms rising into darkness that did not conceal, but simply existed beyond the reach of light. The lantern's glow revealed only what was necessary, allowing the rest to remain undisturbed in its calm persistence. The tower remained behind me. The lantern within it remained. The watcher had continued. And now I continued. The road curved gently forward, its presence neither guiding nor resisting me. Nothing ahead called to me. Nothing required arrival. The quiet remained complete, holding the same calm certainty it had held since the lantern had first allowed me to walk beside it. Somewhere beyond the reach of my light, another place remained, not waiting, not calling, only continuing. The lantern beside me burned with the same steady glow, its warmth unchanged by distance, unchanged by time, and unchanged by the quiet that had never needed to end. I walked without urgency. The road existed beneath me. The lantern remained beside me, and the quiet, which had never begun, continued without end.